I never thought a library could feel wrong. When I took the job as a night librarian at Blackwood Library, I expected long, boring shifts. The place had been around for over 100 years, tucked away at the edge of town where hardly anyone visited anymore. Most of the books were covered in dust, and the building itself smelled like old paper and forgotten time. But the strangest part? The rules. The old man who hired me, Mr. Grayson, handed me a single piece of paper on my first night. His face was serious, his deep-set eyes watching me carefully as I read. Library night rules. Never enter the restricted section. It is locked for a reason. If a book falls from a shelf on its own, put it back immediately. You may hear whispers, but do not respond. Some books are not meant to be read. If you find one that does not have a title, do not open it. If the lights flicker more than 3 times in a row, leave the library at once. I chuckled. Is this a joke? Mr. Grayson didn't laugh. He simply folded his hands and said, "Follow the rules, and you'll be fine." I wanted to ask him more, but he was already walking away, leaving me alone in the dimly lit library. The massive wooden shelves stretched up toward the high ceilings, casting long shadows in the flickering lamplight. It was just a job, I reminded myself, nothing to be afraid of. For the first few hours, nothing happened. I walked between the rows of books, listening to the faint hum of the old fluorescent lights. Every now and then, I heard a creak, probably the building settling. Then, just past midnight, something changed. I was organizing some books near the back of the library when I heard a soft thump. I turned quickly, my heart skipping a beat. A book had fallen from one of the high shelves. At first, I thought it was just loose. Maybe I had bumped the shelf without realizing it. But as I stepped closer, I noticed something strange. The book had no title. Its cover was old and cracked, the leather faded to a dull brown. No author's name, no markings at all. Just a plain, nameless book sitting in the middle of the aisle. I picked it up, turning it over in my hands. The pages were cold, much colder than they should have been. A shiver ran down my spine. Then I remembered the rules. If a book falls from a shelf on its own, put it back immediately. If you find one that does not have a title, do not open it. A strange unease settled over me. Slowly, I reached up and slid the book back into place. The moment it touched the shelf, a whisper brushed against my ear. It was so soft, like the rustling of pages in the wind, a language I didn't understand. I spun around. No one was there. The library was silent. A creeping feeling crawled up my spine. I stepped backward, away from the shelves, my breath shaky. The air around me felt heavier, as if something unseen was standing nearby, watching. Then, out of the corner of my eye, a shadow moved. I turned sharply, but the aisle was empty. The library was playing tricks on me. That's what I told myself as I hurried back to the front desk. My hands felt clammy as I sat down, pretending to focus on my work. I glanced at the clock. 1:13 a.m. I had hours left before my shift ended. As I sat there, trying to shake the uneasy feeling, I noticed something on the desk that hadn't been there before. The nameless book. It was sitting right in front of me. A chill raced through my body. I hadn't brought it here. I hadn't touched it since I put it back. And yet, somehow, it had followed me. I sat frozen, staring at the nameless book resting on the desk in front of me. I knew I hadn't carried it here. I had put it back. I was sure of it. And yet, here it was, sitting right in front of me like it had been waiting for me to notice. The library felt colder now. The silence had weight, pressing down on me like a thick blanket. A part of me wanted to push the book away, pretend I hadn't seen it, maybe even leave for the night. But another part of me, the curious part, wanted to know more. I reached out hesitantly and ran my fingers over the cover. The leather felt wrong, smoother than it should have been, almost alive. A deep chill ran up my arm and I quickly pulled my hand back. Some books are not meant to be read. Mr. Grayson's words echoed in my head, and for once, I was actually considering listening to them. But then, something else happened. A sound, a soft creak from deep within the library. I turned my head toward the noise, my breath catching in my throat. The sound had come from the restricted section. I had never been inside. The area was locked at all times, hidden behind an old iron gate at the very back of the library. Mr. Grayson had made it very clear that I wasn't supposed to go in there. But just as I was thinking about the rules, I heard it again. Another creak, followed by the softest whisper. I swallowed hard. Maybe I was losing my mind. Maybe it was just the old pipes in the walls, or the wind pushing through the cracks in the windows. But something deep inside me whispered back, "You know that's not true." I stood up, pushing my chair back slowly. The book on the desk sat completely still, like it was waiting for me to make a choice. I grabbed my flashlight and took a step toward the back of the library. The moment I moved, the lights overhead flickered once, then twice. I stopped. One more flicker and I'd have to leave. I stood there, waiting, heart pounding. Nothing. I exhaled shakily and kept walking. The restricted section looked older than the rest of the library. The iron gate that separated it from the rest of the building was covered in strange symbols, carved deep into the metal. I had never noticed them before, but now, in the dim glow of my flashlight, they almost looked like they were moving. I shook the thought away. It was just my tired mind playing tricks on me. I reached for the gate, expecting it to be locked. It wasn't. The gate swung open on its own, the rusted hinges groaning loudly. I froze. Something in my gut told me to turn around, to walk away, to never step inside, but I didn't listen. I stepped forward. The air changed the moment I crossed the threshold. The temperature plummeted, my breath coming out in short, foggy bursts. The smell of old paper and dust was stronger here, but beneath it, I caught a hint of something else. Something rotten. The books in this section were different. Their covers were stranger, some wrapped in thick chains, others made of materials I couldn't even identify. A few had no spines, just loose pages bound together by what looked like hair. A deep, unsettled feeling coiled in my chest, but I kept moving. Then, as I passed one of the taller shelves, a book fell. It landed right at my feet. I jumped back, my flashlight shaking in my grip. My heart pounded in my ears. I knew what the rules said. I should have put it back immediately. But I couldn't move, because unlike the book at the front desk, this one had a title, and it was written in my own handwriting. Jason Carter, Final Record. My full name. I never told anyone at the library my full name. A wave of cold dread washed over me. My fingers twitched as I reached for the book, every part of my body screaming at me not to touch it. And then, the lights flickered again. Once, twice. A soft breath of air brushed against my ear, and I heard a whisper. "Open it." I turned sharply, my flashlight sweeping through the shelves. And that's when I saw it. A figure was standing at the very end of the aisle, just beyond the last bookshelf. It was watching me. The moment my flashlight hit it, the figure moved. Not like a person, not walking. It shifted, like a page turning in a book, and then Just like that, it was gone. My hands trembled. The book was still at my feet, waiting. I looked back toward the exit, my breath uneven. I should have left. I should have listened to the rules, but I didn't. With shaky fingers, I picked up the book and opened it. The moment I did, the air around me collapsed. The entire library changed. The moment I opened the book, the entire library shifted. The air turned thick, pressing against me like I had just stepped underwater. The overhead lights dimmed to a faint, sickly glow, casting long, unnatural shadows between the shelves. The usual scent of old paper and dust was gone, replaced by something sharp and metallic, like blood. I knew, deep down, that I had made a mistake, but it was too late to stop now. I looked down at the book in my hands. The pages weren't normal. They moved, not like flipping paper, but like they were breathing. The ink on the pages swirled and twisted, forming words that weren't there before. And then I saw it. The book was writing back. "You shouldn't be here, Jason." My breath hitched. The letters faded as soon as I read them, replaced by new words appearing in slow, deliberate strokes. "You have broken the rule. Now they are awake." I slammed the book shut. The whispering returned instantly, not soft and distant like before. It was all around me, behind me, next to me, beneath me, close. I spun around, flashlight shaking in my grip, but the aisle was empty. My pulse thundered in my ears. The whispering continued, overlapping voices, speaking in a language I didn't understand. Then, a footstep, a slow, deliberate step from the aisle behind me. I wasn't alone anymore. I ran. I didn't know where I was going. I just ran. The bookshelves seemed taller now, stretching endlessly above me, the aisles twisting in directions they shouldn't. The library was changing. The doors that led to the main area, gone. The shelves were no longer neatly lined up but angled, forming a maze that shouldn't exist. I turned a corner and stopped dead. A figure stood at the end of the aisle. Tall, thin, wrong. It wasn't a shadow, but it wasn't human either. Its arms were too long, its fingers grazing the floor. It had no face, just the outline of a head, shifting like ink bleeding into water. And then, it took a step forward. I staggered backward, my breath coming in sharp gasps. My flashlight flickered. The whispering grew louder, rising into a frantic, desperate chant. The figure took another step, then another. It was faster now. The moment the light went out completely, the figure was right in front of me. I felt cold air rush over me, smelled the scent of something rotting. Then, right beside my ear, a whisper, "You let us out." I don't remember running, but suddenly I was back at the desk. The book, that cursed book, was still clutched in my hands. The lights flickered wildly overhead, casting sharp, jerking shadows on the walls. I had to fix this. I threw the book onto the desk and grabbed it with both hands, ready to shove it shut. But the pages were fighting back. The book refused to close. The pages turned wildly on their own, revealing more words, more warnings. "You cannot undo this. You should not have read the words." The library groaned, the walls shaking as if something inside was waking up. I turned back toward the shelves, and my stomach dropped. The figures were everywhere, dozens of them, standing between the shelves, watching me. Tall, faceless shapes with bodies that flickered like candlelight. Some stood still, while others twitched violently, their limbs jerking at odd angles, and then they stepped forward, all at once. I grabbed the book and did the only thing I could think of. I ran straight to the restricted section. The iron gate was still open, its strange symbols glowing faintly now. I didn't know if it would work, but I had no other choice. I reached the farthest shelf and shoved the book back where I found it. The moment I let go, the whispering stopped. The air shifted, the oppressive weight around me lifting slightly. I turned back, my heart still pounding, my breath ragged. The figures were gone. The library was silent again. I stumbled back, my hands shaking. It felt like something had reset, like I had barely managed to shove a door closed before something horrible slipped through. I had fixed it, or so I thought, because when I turned back toward the desk, the nameless book was waiting for me again, but this time the title had changed. Now it read, Jason Carter, Second Warning. I felt a chill crawl up my spine, because deep down I knew there would not be a third warning. I wanted to believe it was over. I wanted to convince myself that putting the book back had somehow fixed everything, that I could finish my shift, go home, and pretend none of this had happened. But the library wasn't done with me. The nameless book sat on the desk again, but now it had a new title. Jason Carter, Second Warning. I took a step back, my hands cold and clammy. I hadn't put it there. I hadn't touched it since placing it back in the restricted section. And yet, it was here, waiting for me. A faint hum filled the air, not whispering this time, but something else. Like the low vibrations of 1,000 pages turning all at once. The bookshelves trembled. The overhead lights flickered wildly. Then, the book opened on its own. The pages flipped rapidly, like a storm had blown through the library, stopping only when they reached the very center of the book. The words weren't written in ink anymore. They were carved into the pages, deep and jagged, like something had scratched them in from the other side. It knows you now. It is coming. A breath of cold air rushed past me, rattling the loose pages on the desk. And then, the lights went out. The darkness was total. Not the kind of darkness where your eyes adjust, where you can make out the faint outline of a doorway or the shape of furniture in the shadows. No, this was something else. It was thick, heavy, like a living thing curling around me, pressing against my skin. I reached for my flashlight with shaking hands, flicking it on, but the beam barely cut through the dark. The shelves stretched higher now, impossibly tall, disappearing into nothing. The air smelled different, old and damp, like something had been rotting here for centuries. And then, the whispering started again, but this time I understood the words. The door's open, the door's open, the door's open. I turned in a slow, terrified circle, shining my weak flashlight into the endless rows of books. Then, I saw it. At the far end of the library, where the restricted section met the deepest shadows, a door had appeared. It was massive, stretching from floor to ceiling, covered in glowing, pulsing symbols like the ones on the iron gate. The door was open, and something was stepping through. I couldn't move. The thing emerging from the door wasn't human. It had no face, just a black void where its features should have been. Its body flickered, shifting between solid and smoke. It was tall, impossibly thin, its arms stretching down past its knees. And as it moved, the whispering grew louder. The door is open, the door is open. The thing took another step, then another. It knew me. I could feel its hunger, its awareness. I backed away, heart hammering, gripping my flashlight like it would somehow protect me. I had to close the door. I had to close it. But before I could move, something grabbed my wrist. I gasped, jerking my arm away, turning my flashlight toward the sensation, and saw a second figure standing beside me. It was me, a twisted, shadowy version of me, Its mouth stretched into an unnatural grin. Its eyes were completely black. "You opened the book," it whispered. My throat closed. I tried to speak, but no words came out. The thing that wore my face tilted its head, studying me. Its mouth moved, but its words came from behind me, from the thing stepping through the door. "You are part of the story now." I ran. I didn't care where I was going. I just knew I had to get away. The shelves twisted around me, shifting as I moved, turning the library into a maze that had never existed before. The whispering followed me. "The door is open. It is awake. You are part of the story now." The exit. I saw it. The main doors of the library were right in front of me, but as I sprinted toward them, the shadows rushed forward, wrapping around the doors like roots, sealing them shut. Number. No, no, no. I turned and came face to face with the thing from the door. It was right there, and this time it spoke in my voice. "You cannot leave." The shadows collapsed in. I felt myself falling, sinking, dissolving. Then, the lights came back on. The library was normal again. I was standing at the front desk, the nameless book in my hands. The whispering was gone. The door was gone. I was alone. I staggered back, my lungs aching, my vision blurring. Had I imagined it? Had I dreamed it? Number. Because when I looked down at the book, the title had changed again. Jason Carter, Last Warning. I dropped the book like it had burned me, because now I knew the truth. The stories in this library weren't written in ink. They were written in people. And I was next. I stood frozen, staring at the book. Jason Carter, Last Warning. My name. My final warning. The library was silent now. The whispering had stopped. The door, the one that shouldn't have existed, was gone. But I knew better. This wasn't over. My breathing was ragged as I stumbled away from the desk. I had to leave. Now I grabbed my bag, my keys, anything I could find. My hands were shaking, slick with sweat as I fumbled with the straps. But as I turned toward the exit, the lights flickered. Once, twice, a third time. My stomach dropped. If the lights flicker more than 3 times in a row, leave the library at once. I bolted. I ran down the aisle, past the endless bookshelves, past the restricted section that still hummed with an eerie energy. My boots pounded against the old wooden floor, echoing in the silence. The exit doors were just ahead. I could see the dim glow of the street lights through the glass, but something was wrong. The shadows were moving, not like before, not just shifting along the walls. They were spreading, stretching, reaching toward me. The library didn't want me to leave. My breath came in short, desperate gasps as I lunged for the door, gripping the handle. And it wouldn't budge. The doors were locked. Number no, no, no. This wasn't happening. I slammed my fist against the glass. "Let me out." Nothing. I turned, my back pressed against the door, and that's when I saw it. The figures were back. Tall, shifting shadows lined the aisles, their hollow faces turned toward me. Some stood completely still, while others twitched violently, their heads tilting at unnatural angles. They were blocking every path. And in the middle of them, stepping slowly from the dark, was the one from the door. It was closer than before. It knew me now. My flashlight flickered, its beam weak and useless against the thick, curling shadows. And then it spoke, not in whispers, not in my voice, but in the voice of every person who had ever been trapped here. "You belong to the library now." I refused. I wasn't going to be part of this place. I wasn't going to become another book on the shelf, another name in the pages. I still had one last chance. My eyes darted to the front desk. The book, The cursed, nameless book was still there, its title staring at me. I didn't understand how I knew, but I felt it. The book was the key. If I didn't return the story to its place, I'd never get out. I ran. The figures moved. They surged toward me, their arms stretching, their hands grasping for my throat, my arms, my legs. I barely made it to the desk. My fingers closed around the book just as a shadow wrapped around my wrist, pulling me back. My skin burned ice cold. The book fluttered open in my hands, and for the first time, I saw the final words written inside. Finish the story or become the story. I slammed it shut. The library collapsed. The figures screamed, a soundless, voiceless wail that rattled my skull. The shelves shook violently, books flying from their places, pages tearing in midair. The air ripped apart. The moment the book sealed, a gust of wind roared through the room, slamming into me like a tidal wave. The shadows shrieked, twisting, retreating, and then silence. I was at the front doors. They were open. The cold night air hit me like a slap to the face, and I didn't hesitate. I ran. I didn't look back, not once. I sprinted across the empty street, my lungs burning, my hands still shaking. I didn't stop until I was inside my car, slamming the door shut, gasping for breath. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles white. The library sat motionless behind me, dark and still. Had it really let me go? Or had I just finished my part of the story? I didn't sleep that night. I didn't sleep for days. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the figures. The faceless, watching figures. I heard the whispering. The door is open. It is awake. You are part of the story now. I quit the job immediately. I didn't even return to pick up my last paycheck. But the nightmare wasn't over, because 2 nights later, I woke up to a sound in my apartment. A soft thump, like a book falling from a shelf. My stomach twisted as I slowly turned my head toward my nightstand. There, sitting neatly in the dim glow of my bedside lamp, was a nameless book. Only this time, the title was different. Jason Carter, Final Chapter. I never should have opened that book.